It's not about calories. It's about the insulin response. It's about hyperinsulinemia, because insulin is the bad guy. People always think of insulin as being the good guy because it lowers your blood glucose. Now, it does lower your blood glucose. That's true. Where does the blood glucose go when it's lowered? It goes into your fat cells for storage. So the way to think about insulin is not that it's the diabetes hormone. You need to think of it as the energy storage hormone. Insulin shunts energy to fat. Insulin makes fat. More insulin, more fat. Anything that drives up insulin is going to drive up weight gain and also chronic metabolic disease, because insulin also causes abnormal growth. Insulin is the driver of cancer.
Before we get into the brain, can you explain how fructose versus glucose relate to insulin and the response and fatty liver?
Sure. So sugar, dietary sugar, sucrose, the stuff you put in your coffee, the crystals, right? Sucrose is 2 molecules in one. Glucose, fructose. They are not the same. Glucose is not that sweet. Glucose is okay. Glucose is like Karo syrup. You don't see people going around chugging Karo syrup, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're not all that interested in glucose, really. Okay, yes, it's an energy substrate. Yes, every cell on the planet can burn glucose for energy, but it's not all that enticing. It's all right in a molasses cookie, but that's about it. All right. Glucose is All right. Now, fructose, on the other hand, that's the molecule that is sweet. That's the molecule we seek. That's the molecule that activates the reward center. That's the molecule that's addictive. And it turns out that fructose is metabolized completely differently from that of glucose. Glucose in the liver goes to glycogen, liver starch. And liver starch is non-toxic. That's what your liver wants to do with excess energy, is turn it into glycogen. That's why marathoners carb load before a race, is to build up their glycogen stores. Turns out fructose does not go to glycogen. And fructose is not metabolized in any other organ other than the liver. So when you consume a fructose load, you're consuming, it's going straight to the liver, and it's not going to glycogen. It's going straight down to your mitochondria. It's overwhelming your mitochondria, and your mitochondria become so overwhelmed that they can't process all that substrate. And so they turn it into fat in an effort to try to export it out of the liver. So it will go to the adipose tissue and leave the liver alone. Now, sometimes it does that effectively, in which case you end up with high triglycerides in the blood, and high triglycerides can lead to heart disease and obesity. But sometimes the fat in the liver doesn't make it out. Sometimes it precipitates in the liver. Now you've got a lipid droplet. Now you've got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And what that does is that mucks up the works in terms of signaling. And so that creates this thing called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance means your pancreas has to work harder to make the liver do its job. When that happens, that raises insulin levels all over the body. And so that's what's driving energy into fat at that point. So glucose goes to glycogen. Yes, glucose stimulates an insulin release. That's true, but the insulin then comes down. Fructose stimulates insulin resistance, and the insulin does not come down. So even though glucose is not great, it's a walk in the park compared to fructose. And sugar is both.
And the glucose is actually giving you stored energy to burn for athletics or that sort of thing, where the fructose is not.
So I don't know how old you are, Sarah. But
47.
Okay, you're not old enough to remember the original Gatorade.
I drank a lot of Gatorade. It could have been the original. I had my soccer games.
Okay, well, if you're 47, you probably were not drinking the original. You're probably drinking what happened after Pepsi bought Gatorade. Pepsi bought Gatorade in 1992. When were you playing soccer?
86. 80.
86?
Yeah.
Well, then maybe you did. I don't know. Anyway, once upon a time, there was this thing called Gatorade. In 1965, Dr. Robert Cade invented this concoction that he saw caused uh, uh, sodium and water absorption across the brush border of the intestine to increase plasma volume and to be able to replete glycogen. It was a combination of sodium, glucose, and water. The same thing we give cholera victims in India today, an oral rehydration solution. And because he was at the University of Florida, he called it Gatorade, and he patented it. And in 1972, the Florida Gators won the Sugar Bowl against the Auburn Tigers, and Gatorade made a big splash. So that original Gatorade had glucose, sodium, and water. That's it. It tasted like tiger piss. It tasted awful. Okay. And I remember it. And I remember thinking to myself, who in their right mind would drink this crap? Well, not that many people, apparently. Stokely's made Gatorade. That was who the University of Florida licensed it to originally. Well, in 1992, Pepsi bought Gatorade, and they said, how are we going to market this? And they did two things: Michael Jordan and high fructose corn syrup. So Gatorade never had fructose in it before 1992, but they added high fructose corn syrup to it to make it sweet. Now, was that fructose necessary for Gatorade to work? No. Why did they add it?
To make sure people were going to buy it and drink it.
There you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. So glucose was in Gatorade before fructose was. And the question is, does it need to be? And the answer is no, it doesn't need to be, but it is, because that's what sells.
You know what's so amazing, Rob, is that my daughter is an athlete at USC on the rowing team. And you go into this amazing athletic facility, amazing, professional. You would think that you were going into the New York Giants facility. And in their refrigerator is all the snacks and the protein foods for them and the energy drinks. And there's Gatorade and things that are even worse. And then the protein snacks are these little packaged like peanut butter crackers, such and such, that you would give your kindergartner for their lunch. Right. And I'm thinking that's why this message is so important, because even at the highest level, people don't understand that processed food is not real food and what it's doing to the liver, the brain, and the gut. The three things that really are our lives, right?
We haven't even gotten to the brain yet.
No, we haven't.